If the name Dave Ramsey rings a bell, it is only because he is a renowned financial expert, author, and radio show host who has helped millions of people to take control of their finances. This video is not exactly about him, though. It's about one of his most popular money management strategies, called the cash envelope stuffing method. There are people today that swear by this strategy and claim that it completely changed their finances. But what exactly is this strategy about, and is it all that it's cracked up to be? That's what we'll be talking about in this video. Getting right into it, the cash envelope strategy is, at its core, a budgeting technique designed to help individuals and families manage their spending more effectively. The concept is simple. Allocate specific amounts of cash to different spending categories and place that cash in labeled envelopes. Each envelope would represent a different budget category, such as groceries, dining out, entertainment, or clothing. The big idea behind cash envelope stuffing is to be able to track how much money you spend. Many people don't even bother to check how much they have in their account. They just keep swiping and hoping that whatever is in there would cover whatever purchase they are trying to make. This could lead, and has led, to some very unnecessary expenses or embarrassment at a fancy restaurant. However, with the cash envelopes, you, first off, already have money allocated to different expenses, which could eliminate the embarrassment. And then you'd have to try really hard to not notice how much money you have left. The cash envelope stuffing is also supposed to force you to stick with your budget. When you want to pay for something, you're only supposed to spend whatever is in the envelope allocated to that particular expense. And when the money in that envelope is gone, you'd be forced to, stop spending money. Of course, you could go back to your account to withdraw some money if there is anything in there, but the envelopes force you to be disciplined. Plus, there's something about the cash envelope stuffing method that kind of fixes this. Having said that, how do you go about this cash envelope thing? Well, the first step is to create a budget, a comprehensive one. We're not just talking about giving a general idea of how much income you make monthly and what expenses you would have for the month. Your budget needs to be as detailed as possible. So, list out all your sources of income, all the money that comes from these different sources, and how frequently money comes in. Then, go ahead and list out all your expenses for the month. Ensure that your budget accounts for necessities like rent or mortgage payments, utilities, transportation costs, and savings. These expenses would not be put in envelopes. You should actually consider automating payments in the essential category, if possible. Before we dive deeper into Dave Ramsey's cash envelope system, let me know in the comments below if you've ever tried using physical cash to manage your budget. Now, Dave Ramsey recommends that you aim for a zero-based budget. What this means is that every single dollar you get from your sources of income should have something to do. Nothing should just be lying there. This does not mean that you need to spend everything, though. Remember that your budget needs to include things like savings, investments, and even an emergency fund. The next step in the cash envelope stuffing method is to identify discretionary spending categories. Discretionary spending includes expenses that are not fixed and can vary from month to month, including things like groceries, dining out, entertainment, clothing, and personal care items. These are usually the areas where you leak money, so they would form the categories where you'll use cash envelopes. I should probably mention that discretionary spending items don't have to be the same for everybody. If you have a car maintenance would be a part of your discretionary spending items. If you don't ever eat out, you don't have to budget for that. However, things like dues that you pay as a member of a club or something might be an essential expense because those are usually regular and you have to pay them. Once you've identified your discretionary spending categories, decide how much money you'll allocate to each one. Be realistic and consider your income, needs, and financial goals. And it goes without saying that you need to prioritize your essential expenses. Well, your groceries also need to be prioritized because you absolutely have to eat. The bottom line here is to cut your coat according to your cloth. With that done, you can go ahead and label each envelope with the name of the category and the allocated amount of cash. After you receive your paycheck, immediately withdraw the designated amounts and place them in their respective envelopes. If you get paid weekly, you could either create a weekly budget or divide your monthly budget into 4, whatever works for you. Having a weekly budget might actually help you to be even better disciplined and make sure that you have money to spend throughout the month. Think about it. If you budget $400 for groceries for the month, you could go wild and spend all of that money in just 2 weeks, which means you'd be forced to stay without groceries or take money from something else. But breaking that $400 down into $100 per week might help you to stick with your budget even better. Just saying. If you will be using the cash envelope stuffing method, it is important that you only spend what is in the envelope. In fact, Dave Ramsey has mentioned that you should take the appropriate envelope with you when you go shopping. And if you unfortunately leave the right envelope at home, you need to turn around and go home instead of just swiping your credit card. You need to be really strict with yourself if you'll be doing this. That said, you might occasionally find that you've underestimated or overestimated your spending in a particular category. Don't be afraid to adjust your envelope allocations as needed. Flexibility is key to long-term success with this strategy. However, Dave Ramsey recommends that if, at the end of the month, you find that you were thrifty with some of your categories and still have some money left, you shouldn't exactly go on a spending spree. Squirrel that money away in your savings account or something. But I guess you could take a small portion of that to congratulate yourself on a job well done. Not all of it, though. Now that you know how the cash envelope method works, you might understand why some people swear by it. The method forces you to come face to face with your spending habits and gives you no other option but to do something about it. So it's a good way to stay accountable for your spending. When you see physical cash depleting, you become more aware of your expenditures, which should make it easier for you to make more conscious decisions. This method could also help you to pull yourself out of debt or stay out of it if you aren't already in one. How? Well, by limiting your spending to the allocated cash in each envelope, you are less likely to accumulate credit card debt or overspend in discretionary categories. You are also more likely to stick with your budget for savings, part of which can be directed towards debt repayment. At the end of the day, though, it all boils down to discipline. The cash envelope method could also help eliminate financial stress and uncertainty. If you follow the method strictly, you won't only know how much money you have at every point in time. You can also be sure that the money you have would stretch for the entire month. You'd even be prepared for surprises with your emergency fund. That said, this method is not exactly foolproof. There are a few drawbacks to using the cash envelope strategy, and it is important to consider them before taking the plunge. To start with, we all know that cards, whether it be credit cards or debit cards, are really convenient. That's why they have almost completely replaced cash payments. Switching over to carrying cash around could be quite inconvenient, both for you and the merchants you'd be paying. Think about it. There are actually some restaurants that do not accept cash payment, and there's also the fact that you'd no longer be able to pay at the pump if you are paying with cash. However, you might also want to consider the fact that the cash envelope method does not require you to pay for every single thing in cash. You can continue to pay for things like your rent, mortgage, utilities with your card, or straight from your bank account. Those expenses are usually the heavy ones. So, while it could be inconvenient to carry cash around, it might not be that much money, unless, of course, you're a multimillionaire. Plus, the distance between the pump and where you go to pay with cash isn't that long. That said, more than just being inconvenient, there are some expenses that you actually cannot pay for with cash. Entertainment is a big example of this. Streaming services are typically paid for online. So unless you decide to only get your entertainment at the cinema, you would have to find your way around this one, maybe make an exception for it. The problem, though, is that it might be difficult to track these online payment expenses. Something else that you want to consider is that when you lose cash, there's no getting it back. But if you lose a card, whether it is a debit card or a credit card, your money would still be safe in your bank account. Unless, of course, your card was stolen, and then all your hard-earned money could be gone in one fell swoop. All of that said, Dave Ramsey's cash envelope strategy is a practical and effective tool for taking control of your finances. Sure, there are a few drawbacks, but there are also a lot of pluses. You'd have to decide for yourself which one outweighs which. If you've had any personal experiences or success stories with the cash envelope method, we'd love to hear about them. Drop your stories below and let's learn from one another. Now, if you want to learn more about zero-based budgeting, I have a separate video dedicated to this entire topic in even more depth, so watch this video next.